Welcome, everyone. You are listening to the new episode of the Votes and Seats podcast series of the Center for Political Science at Mathias Corvinus Collegium. My name is Szabolcs Janik, senior researcher of the center. A snap federal election was held in Germany on the 23rd of February in the aftermath of the collapse of the so-called traffic light coalition, 7 months ahead of the scheduled election. What processes led to a snap election? What was the campaign like? What happened at the polls? What motivated the voters? Who are the winners and losers of the election? What will happen to the AfD? When will Germany have a new government? And I have the honor to discuss these and similarly interesting questions with Oliver Lembcke, professor of political science at the Ruhr University in Bochum, and who is also a currently visiting fellow at MCC. Dear professor, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you once again. And just to start with an icebreaker question, and so our listeners can get to know you a little more, I will start with this one. What motivated you to become a political scientist? Why did you choose this profession? Why did you choose this academic field?
Well, that should be an easy question, but actually it's kind of a tough question for me. Brings me back a long time ago. I think I was just happy to be a good student, and I was interested in Roman language and Greek and Roman history, and that brought me to the idea of studying history, which I did eventually then. And something that has always fascinated me, still fascinates me, this the history of political ideas, and that's basically my profession now. I know it sounds a bit silly, but to a large extent, at least it sounds, or it looks like that to me. It's kind of a very linear way that I took, although one should be maybe more critical and skeptical about your way that you do in life. But I think I basically have become more or less what I always wanted to become. So in many ways, to me, it was kind of a logical thing to do. At the university, I switched between some points of interest. Political parties have become of interest for me, but that also depended a bit on the situation. I have always fancied history and the history of political ideas, of thoughts, of movements, contexts, and so on and so forth. And let's say 2 decades ago, I became much interested in democracy as a concept. Why? Because I think it gave me the opportunity to mix empirical studies with normative questions. And that is something that ever since then has been part of my, I think, of my academic career. And there's another point that had become to me important quite early on. It was the relationship between politics and law. And I knew before I entered university, actually, I knew almost at the end of my time at school that the title or topic of my dissertation would be the German Constitutional Court. I knew that before I even started to study. Again, for me, if I look back, it has been quite a very linear, logical kind of clear development. But it had, of course, many hiccups, ups and downs, sideways, detours, etc., etc. It took me a long time to finally brought to the world, so to say, what I had to say about the Constitutional Court. So there were many struggles, internal struggles, and developments, evolvements involved. So focusing on that, nothing was clear to me. but there has been an underlying development that always guided me, obviously, and I'm very happy that I can do what I obviously always wanted to do.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing this background story of yours with us, listeners. And I'm very convinced, feel very convinced that we picked the right academic to do this podcast episode. I'm quite sure, but okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Turning to the topic of today's episode, could you please tell us in a nutshell what led to this snap federal election
Yeah.
in Germany, well ahead of the ordinary one scheduled for late September this
Yeah.
year.
Yes, snap elections are not that common in Germany. This is one element why we in Germany think we have a stable government, usually, typically, something we can rely on, and that is also based on the idea we have a stable party system. And I think we should eventually come to the conclusion that this is no longer true anymore. So snap elections may become something more common in the foreseeable future because the party system has changed and the structure of the party system has severely changed, especially if you look at the party system in the West and in the east of Germany. But maybe I come back to that later on. So the first and simple answer to that is the government between, which collected the parties, the Social Democrats, the Liberals, and the Greens. And I think you also already mentioned the traffic light government, because it's the Social, the Liberals, and the Greens means red, yellow, and green. They had different views on how to deal with how to finance subsidies and the economy in general, and also in the light of the engagement Germany's engagement and support for the Ukraine. And one of the let's say factors that played a decisive role was the decision made by the Constitutional Court, basically to stop a certain way of financing German politics. It has been very convenient before the German Constitutional Court stopped that kind of financing trick, if you may say so. That was the idea. We used the money for the pandemic, the leftovers, so to say, and put it all in for the ecological transformation that was especially fancied by the Greens. And every quarrel we have in the cabinet, we can basically solve by you get your money and you get your money, and then we solve the problem by spending simply more money. And after the Constitutional Court has ordered to stop this kind of shadow financing thing, once they stopped it, it was all about priorities and what we do really actually have in common. Within the cabinet of this traffic light government, and to me, to no surprise, they found out that they not much have a lot in common. Yeah, that's the point. The real reason for the split up and the snap elections eventually then was that they have this is a crossover, if I may say so, government. Crossover means you have two parties from the left and one party from the right, and they need to come together in order to have the majority in parliament. And they, I think, have betrayed themselves a bit by we have a lot in common in terms of the social cultural policies, maybe also including migration, but other things also, liberalizing, for instance, abortion, or liberalizing the use of drugs, cannabis especially, and so on. So in that sense, they had a lot in common. But when it came to let's say the bread and butter issues of economic policies, social policies, and also the outlook of how the German economy should transform itself within the next decade, let's say, then they had huge difference, especially between the Greens and the Liberals. The Greens are all in for subsidizing branches of the economy which they think are very much of importance. Green steel, for instance. And on the other side, you have the idea that the market itself should be enough in order to provide the way of this kind of transformation. Tax reduction on the one side, the liberals, tax improvements and more subsidies and so on the other side. So that's so there had been I don't mean to say a hidden dissent, but a huge dissent in the very beginning. It should have been clear from the beginning that it's very challenging, this kind of government. And I think there was some deception and misunderstanding, and it became then clear after this decision by the Constitutional Court that they had to find a common ground and more or less a consensus on the main issues of their outlook of policies, especially in the field of economic and social policies, and they failed. So then it was also a bit of a staged thing, let's say. The liberals have been blamed to be, to have a plan to basically find a way out of the government, which they have seemed to burden them and to burden the chances for the next election. And on the other side, the Social Democrats also, let's say, had a way of ending all this. And then eventually, at the end of the year 24, the chancellor dismissed Christian Lindner, which is the head of the Liberals and the Minister of Finance, and with that, it was the end of the government. And then the snap election had to come eventually.
Yeah, this is history.
Yeah,
looking back today. And if you turn to this campaign, what were the key campaign topics and promises that the parties communicated, and in your opinion, which matter the most to voters and were attractive and maybe even might have had significant impact on the result? And considering the record high turnout since the unification of the country, what was the general stake of the election for the voters? What do you think? What motivated them to go to the polls in such a large number?
Yeah, this is a very complex and interesting question. Let's start with the topics, and help me if I forget about the voter turnout later on. But because in their strategy, it should have been a classic a campaign. The Christian Democrats wanted to have a campaign on the economy, and the Social Democrats wanted to have a campaign on social policies. And they were basically fit for this kind of clash, and that was also the way they started. As a surprise, no mentioning of environment politics, climate change politics. That was not a topic, I don't mean to say at all, but it was really marginalized by also the Greens. That was a surprise, because they had a different game plan, if I may say so. They wanted to stay in government, and they knew from the polls, which were completely clear about this, the only chance to stay in government is to build a coalition with the Christian Democrats, not with the Social Democrats. So again, a crossover of left and the right party, a party from the right side of the political spectrum. And so that was the game plan. And for that matter, not only, but also in order to be, suitable for the Christian Democrats, they downplayed climate change, which has become a very polarized issue for many reasons. I leave the reasons out now, but it has been, if you go into a room and 10 people attend your speech and you win over with climate change politics nowadays, maybe 2 or 3 die-hard Greens, but the left, the rest of the gang, so to say, will leave and will something like, we don't want to hear about it. We have other issues are of importance. So the Greens themselves downplayed this thing. You can see it if you take the campaign manifesto, for instance. I think it is on the 4th or 5th place that they mention climate change. So that's telling in a way. It has been the winner issue in 21 in the election 2021, but it has been downplayed for this reason, because it has been such a polarized issue. Had been downplayed by the Greens themselves. And from the Christian Democrats and Social Democrats, you don't hear anything about it. It was for the Christian Democrats all about tax breaks, and for the Social Democrats it was about pensions and rents and so on and so forth. Yeah. Is it affordable to rent a house or an apartment? And the pension is always a big thing for Social Democrats. So that was the game plan. And the Christian Democrats also knew that voters wanted to hear something about migration. It was also of major concern for the voters, because there have been some very ugly attacks before the election campaign started. But then there were even more of these ugly attacks by perpetrators coming with a background of being migrant. whether they are illegal or they had a status that they could stay or they simply violated their permanent residence status by doing criminal offenses or something like that. There were differences in that, but all of these attacks were made by people with a migration background. And that, of course, raised the question of migration as a hot issue during the campaign a lot, immensely. It was already one of the top issues, but then it became the number one issue. And the game plan for the Christian Democrats was to, take care of this issue, mentioning it, elaborating on it, but don't exaggerate things, because there's the right-wing populist party of the AfD only waiting for this issue to come up, because then you have this outbidding problem. Can you, as a Christian Democrat under Merkel, causing basically the influx of migration in these huge amounts, and then at the same time being credible to solve the problem? Is that credible to voters? And most likely, if you are competing with Social Democrats and especially the Greens, you win. But if you compete with the AfD, you may lose this issue to voters. So they wanted to have a control, let's say, and to use a typical German football term, a controlled offensive. Yeah, you go in the offensive and make the others play defense on this issue, but controlled because of the right-wing populists. And it failed because of these attacks. These attacks were really ugly. Many casualties, ugly pictures, and so on and so forth. It was really, people were outraged, and the overall sense was, why don't you do something about it? Why haven't you done anything about it? So stop this kind of excuses and stop making us believe that the system is workable. It's not. Stop it, do something about it. And this is, of course, one of the key elements, not only for the campaign, but for democratic politics in general. If people stop to believe that politics can make a difference, you have a real problem as a political party. So it's also about this issue. And this was these were the issues during the campaign. And the game plans, so to say, and many of them, I don't mean to say failed, but it turned out to be different than the political parties wanted this election to be. And the voter turnout, I think what I said is already connected with that. The voter turnout is high. You're absolutely correct about it. It has been as high as before the reunification elections. It's astonishing. And usually in Germany, the narrative is the more people, the higher the voter turnout, the more people go to the election and vote, the better it is for the democratic legitimation. As an American citizen would say, be careful of what you wish for. Yeah, I'm not an American citizen. I'm a German citizen, but I think this phrase is kind of fitting. Be careful of what you wish for, because the high voter turnout has only benefited the political parties at the margin of the political spectrum. The radicals and the extremist parties and populist parties have benefited from it. For instance, the liberals have a net sum of minus 40,000, something like that. So actually, by having more people going to vote, the liberals voted in absolute numbers their share of voters, which is also telling. And the Christian Democrats to some extent gained from this. They have gained something like 1 million voters, less than that, but something around this number. But especially the left populist party, so-called Linkspartei, and the AfD, Alternative for Germany, AfD, have gained. The AfD has gained almost 2 million voters. Of voters that have not voted before, Nichtwähler, non-voters before. So, if you actually want to make the argument that a higher voter turnout is better for the democratic legitimation, then you must also more or less conclusively argue it's good that the parties on the left and right margin of the political spectrum is also good for German for the German democracy, and not many people are of this opinion. So I think Germans also in this sense should stop to be naive about this. These are the numbers, and I think it's a sign of a polarized society.
You already touched upon the result and maybe the order of the parties and their vote shares. What did you find personally the most interesting about the result? Was it voter turnout? Was it support for a specific party, or the overall picture? What was the most surprising for you?
Actually, that was no surprise at all. That was the surprise. The polls were kind of clear about it. They have been very stable, and that actually surprised me because a lot of things happened. First of all, you had a snap election with a lot of blame game. The chancellor blamed the liberals blamed the Greens. The Greens tried to blame nobody and was sort of convincing with that. The Christian Democrats started to blame the Greens, and they really played a hard blame game with them. And so there was and then you had all these attacks and this huge amount of dissatisfaction, and and also the German the constituency, the electorate is kind of have become kind of fluid, and you have a lot of shifts usually. And what we could see is there has been many things happening, but the polls stay basically the same, and that surprised me. It's because of the attacks, for instance, and also the reaction of the Christian Democrats. I may you have heard about it. There have been 2 votes in parliament forced by the Christian Democrats on migration, and basically the message was that Merz, the main candidate for the Christian Democrats and most likely the next chancellor, Friedrich Merz, basically said, I do not look to the left, I do not look to the right, I just look ahead and I want to solve it. Whoever votes and supports it. Means also an invitation for the AfD. I mean, that was basically the idea of it. That was an invitation for the AfD to build a majority with the Christian Democrats, and they did. They did it when it came to the first election. They failed for the second election. But, I mean, apart from the outcome and the results, both parties and others came together and voted for a bill of the Christian Democrats, and were supported by the right-wing populists. And that was many saw this as a clear contradiction to the so-called firewall. We don't do anything, never, ever, 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 never again with the right-wing populist AfD. So that was a breach. Many political observers thought it was a breach. And you could have believed something like, okay, now there's some dynamics on the polls. It's either that the Christian Democrats gain from this maneuver or they lose from this maneuver, but it basically stayed the same. That came to me as a surprise, and there was a small surprise. That was the left-wing populist, the so-called Linkspartei. They regained attraction. They had all of a sudden traction with the young voters, and basically many observers, me included, thought this is basically the last election for them. But a lot of things changed between the election was a complete failure in September 24. There you had the election in the east part of Germany, and the Linkspartei, usually kind of strong in these parts of Germany, in these regions, it was a catastrophe. It was really a disastrous result. And I thought also, together with others, so that's basically, that's the end of it. But a lot of things have changed. Among them, the new party, so-called Bündnis für Sarah Wagenknecht, Union for Sarah Wagenknecht, that's a split up from this left-wing party, Linkspartei. They were very, very successful in these eastern elections. They are a new party built in the beginning of 24, And they were not only able to enter parliament, but were also able to enter, in two cases, enter government as a new party that has been entered the scene. And that was really an astonishing success. And all of us, if I may say so, believed that's just one more factor that basically would kill off the Linkspartei, but it was not. And one of the reasons was they had a new political leadership, always helps, much more dynamic, much more charismatic than the old one. But there were other things, and one of the things is that there's the split up of the BSW from the left. From the party of the left, the Linkspartei, helped them to get a coherent message again. Because Sarah Wagenknecht is in Germany a very famous figure. You can see her and everybody, and he's very famous, and she's invited in every talk show. And she represented for a longer time the Linkspartei, which she basically tried to cannibalize, tried to destroy from inside. And since she basically went away and took her supporters with her, it was it enabled the Linkspartei to represent themselves in a much better way. And it also was possible for them to get a clear left radical populist message also in the terms of migration, because we had this outbidding game in the migration policy. Basically everybody wanted to be more strict on migration, and the left party was the only party that neglected that and said, no, we are left and we are welcome refugees and solidarity and whatever. And because of the BSW was also playing this outbidding game and being more strict on migration, it was possible for everybody who was not satisfied with this being more strict on migration to find a new political home.
We've heard a lot about the winners, absolute winners, the relative winners of this election, including the union parties. They have the left resurrecting from its ashes, but we have heard a bit less about the true losers of this election. You mentioned the liberals, for example. They can be a good point in this case. But how deep is their crisis? So what is there a way out for these parties that suffered great loss in their vote share in this election?
I think we see at least 3 losers of this election. Also, the winner, formally the winner, the Christian Democrats, should ask themselves very serious questions. For instance, the main question is the traffic light parties, the parties that built the government before the snap election, lost 20 points together. And the Christian Democrats were only able to gain 4 points. I think they should really take a very deep breath and take a very good look at the analysis why this was such a meager result. They are the strongest party. Maybe you could say they're also the last catch-all party, Letzte Volkspartei. But they really do a deep dive into the data why they have been successful, yes, but only in a very limited way. That's so. The winner is also in part the loser here. Then the Greens. The Greens underperformed. They try to comfort themselves by saying, yeah, well, we are the only party that has not been treated so badly by the voters, but actually they are totally dissatisfied, and they should be, because in the last election they also underperformed heavily. Their expectation was 20-something, and they came out with 13, 14 or something like that. And now it's under 12. And so they underperformed again, second time in a row. And what is the reason for that? The reason why they are not, why the result is not that catastrophical than with the Social Democrats and the Liberals, is that they have a ideological core of voters who stick with them whatever they do. And this is different now with the Liberals and the Social Democrats. But their strategy was, of course, to make inroads with also Christian democratic voters who liked Angela Merkel, and it completely failed by doing it. So this is also time for a deep analysis and so on and so on. You could tell that things have changed and things must change now in the Greens by the withdrawal of Robert Habeck and Annalena Baerbock, the two front person leadership, the main and real leadership of the Green political party. They withdrew their position, and that's a clear sign that something is going on in the Greens, and that it should. For the Liberals, it's a disaster. They are not. They failed to enter parliament. The polls showed that this was being at least very close and most likely not successful for them. Christian Lindner also withdrew. He's not the party leader anymore. I think it's necessary, this break, but they also should analyze in more depth, because they have been limited. It has a process of being, so to say, narrowed down to only tax breaks. It's a party of tax breaks. They have been a party for many issues in foreign policy, domestic policies, but they have become a party with a very limited program, ideological wise, and also in terms of the personnel, it has thinned out, if I may say so, and they need to reinvent them on a broader scale. And now the Social Democrats. I mean, here you see a real problem with the German political system. It is a problem, has become a problem. The biggest loser is now again most likely part of the next government, and that of course gives you the impression that do elections really matter? I mean, if you vote someone out of office and the party is coming back and being in office, that's a problem. Of course, the Chancellor Olaf Scholz will not be part of the cabinet anymore, but that was clear before. But for instance, the political leadership of the Social Democrats, they drew not any consequences for themselves. They are still the leadership who is basically in charge, responsible for this disastrous result. And they lost 10 points, something like that. And it's not only because of the circumstances; it's because they have they do politics against the preferences and interests of their own constituency. And I'm a bit. It puzzles me time and again why they are clinging to this kind of strategic outlook, and by that losing their own constituency already for a longer time. I mean, how bad can it come? They have now reached the 15-16% of the electorate. That is, or to let me put it differently, Schulz was the candidate in 2017, and they reached an all-time low with a result of 20%. Schulz was a wrong candidate, and they also at that time had a completely wrong ideological program, and so on and so forth. And now Scholz is worse than Schulz, and that's something. And they dropped again, now 10 points, and it's an historical all-time low of this party.
And if you look at the election result, can we see a sign of a structurally changing party competition, party system in Germany? This West-East divide can be a durable one, and this will determine everything in the party system, party competition. How do you see these processes?
Yeah, it has been a long narrative that once the East has been modernized and the quality of living goes up and the earnings goes up and so on and so forth, the East will eventually become more like the West, so they become more similar. And actually, I think it's the other way around. I think that the West becomes more like the East. The party identity is losing out. The electorate gets more fluid, and it's more approachable for populist party because of also the dissatisfaction with the established parties, and this dissatisfaction goes deeper and deeper. It's not that they're only dissatisfied, so-called Protestwähler, voters and protest, because of some certain issues or maybe even person, but it's a deep dissatisfaction with the way politics is done in Germany, and the outcome, the results of political parties, and they're dissatisfied with that because they lose out more and more their belief that politics can make a difference, political parties can make a difference, and that's going on in the East, and that's going on also in the West. So the similarities between the fluid voter markets and the decline of trust in institutions, trust in political parties, trust in the political personnel is becoming similar, but not in the way that it's strengthened in the East, but it's lessening in the West. So that's the point. The distrust grows, and the dissatisfaction and attachment and so on and so forth grows in the West, like it is in the East. So that's the process. That's why I'm saying the West becomes more like the East and not the other way around. And as for the party systems, yes, you're absolutely correct in this question. I mean, there are huge differences in the party system structure, which has, of course, a huge influence of the competition. Typically, we have this kind of competition in the West that you have the left versus the right, and they struggle for the center. And with the help of a smaller party, one of the big parties on the left or on the right side, center left, center right, Christian Democrats or Social Democrats, built the government. Okay, it has been basically different in the east part of Germany ever since then, ever since the reunification, and it has been transformed, but not to the better. You have more or less not this kind of two camps like you have in the West, but you have three poles, if I may say so. It's a tripolar system, I think. You have a center, and the center is that it doesn't really matter whether it's Christian Democrats or Social Democrats. They built the center, and they are more or less undistinguishable, because in the southeast, it's the Christian Democrats, and the Social Democrats are near to the extinction, so to say. They are with 6% in Thuringia and 6% in Saxonia. They are almost at the verge of becoming thrown out of parliament. So they built together a core of something like 30%. And by the way, in the northeast, you have still strong Social Democrats, but, well, very weak Christian Democrats. It's the other way around. So I would say they build a core, and really matters a bit of whether you talk about the southeast or the west or the northeast. And then you have two other poles, but both of them are basically dominated by populists. You have the left populist pole before the new party of the BSW, it was the left, the Linkspartei, now and the BSW is very successful in the east part of Germany, and basically together they have also something like 30%. And this is no matter whether you look at Thuringia or Brandenburg or Saxonia, etc., pp. So 30%, and then you have the West, and I'm sorry, the right, and there you have. Before that, it was the Christian Democrats, but they moved into the center and have become the center pole, so to say. But now it's the AfD with a amount of voters supporting the party of something like, again, 30%. So you have three poles. They are basically at the same strength. You have one pole with the democratic parties, if you may say so. They see themselves as being the bulwark or the firewall against the populists. And then you have two populist wings, also democratically elected, by the way, with a share of 30%. And that's the main difference compared to the West. That's the main difference. But it shows the potential, and it shows where the direction, because the AfD is growing, and the Linkspartei has gained a lot of support by the young voters also in the West. They are now basically making inroads in big cities. You have typically green and leftish voters there, and they make inroads, and especially young women who would have voted maybe Green before, now vote for the left party, and so they attack here the so-called Democratic Party of the center left, and with the AfD, it also gains in the West, and why not? I mean, if in Gelsenkirchen, for instance, if people are, out of job, have problems with migration and integration, and don't have enough money, etc., why should they feel good about politics and themselves and the society? Why shouldn't they feel left out, left behind? And this is, of course, this sentiment is, it's basically. It's the way it's something that the AfD, the populists, gain from immensely so, and in many ways also rightly so, because they address the dissatisfaction. I mean, there need to be the address of the dissatisfaction. I wish, of course, that other parties would solve the problems that lead to this kind of dissatisfaction, but the solution cannot be we don't have any party and don't have any voice addressing the problems and the dissatisfaction with the political systems.
The Union parties and SPD are conducting formal coalition talks these days to form the new government.
Yeah.
How compatible are the two parties' manifestos and key policy positions, and what can be the most conflicting points that will prove to be the hardest to overcome in these talks?
In many ways, I think the situation is already has passed this question, because we see now that they have agreed. Whether they make this bill will make it through Parliament, we'll see. But for that, you need the Green Party and the support of the Green Party. And since the Christian Democrats have basically bashed the Green Party during their campaign, I wonder if they will actually help now, the Christian Democrats in particular, to get this bill passed. But the bills, what I'm talking about, is about huge subsidies, huge amount of money, and funds in order to finance the military in particular, but also the infrastructure. We talk about $500 million of euros, so that has already solved one of the questions you are asking me now, because otherwise I would have said they have contradictory views on economic policies, and the Christian Democrats, I can't help to say it, campaigned by saying no subsidies anymore, no special funds anymore. Let's take a sober look at the money and prioritize the issues, etc., etc. But I mean that's history. If the bill makes it through Parliament, they have 1 billion and $1.5 billion. I'm sorry, billion, Milliarden in German. That's always a bit tricky. They both have agreed upon that. That means they already reached a compromise on one of the main promises and priorities of the Social Democrats, and by the way, even also by the Greens. The Greens really must feel, a bit funny, because the Christian Democrats have bashed them during the whole campaign because of spending money for the infrastructure by these kinds of special funds, and now they bashed them. Now they agreed with the Social Democrats. They are also in part responsible for the bad result the Greens had in the result. And now they are depending on the votes of the Greens for getting it through. I mean, this is how politics is. But it can be very dirty, let's say, and it is a bit dirty. And it's also, it's hard to avoid the impression that this is basically a breach of trust and what they promised during the campaign. I'm talking about the Christian Democrats. They basically said the opposite of what they are doing right now. There are reasons for that. We can go into details, but I'm leaving that out for now. I'm just saying this could have been a huge point which they would have struggled and quarreled about, but this is already gone.
And my final question concerns the future of German-Hungarian bilateral relations, which are very important to us. We hear a lot of news, of developments. And what is your expectation? Should we have a Merz government in the foreseeable future? How will Merz and Orbán get on together, considering the fact that Weidel was here a month ago here in Budapest with Orbán?
Yeah. Yes, that's an interesting question. Let me start by saying I think that both countries are really, culturally speaking, close to each other. Politically speaking, I've never experienced so many, interest in Germany and German politics. So many people being capable of speaking German, not only a few words, but really well. That's for a German an unusual experience, if I may say so. That's one thing. Politically speaking, we also have a lot in common because I think it's kind of obvious to see that the majority of the Hungarians want policies center-right and the government center-right. And this is also true for the German population or constituency, at least. They are in a majority moved from the leftish center to the center right for already a longer time. The difference is you get it, we don't. That's the difference. Yeah. And there are many reasons for that, but so that's and you could from that kind of short analysis assume that there should be politically also a lot of things that we do have in common, but it's the opposite is true. The relationship, I think, is in bad shape. Orban has been has a bad reputation in Germany, not only by the left but also in part with the Christian Democrats. I know about, the relationship between the Bavarian CSU Christian Democrats there, Christian Social Democrats there, and Fidesz and Orban, but that has also thinned out, in my opinion. And with the Christian Democrats, the CDU, ever since Merkel, I think the relationship is in bad shape. So it could only improve, one could say. But then you have things like the announcement of a liberal democracy or a liberal state by Orban a few years ago, which has been, it's always very difficult to explain something like that in Germany. The word itself, is taken by so many people who are interested in basically finger pointing, saying, see, that's what I mean. He is a populist, at least. He's a right-wing lunatic, and we cannot do business with him. And, accepting Weidel's in request and having her together at the press conference, etc., doesn't help, because the AfD is really the enemy of the Christian Democrats. That this is what the firewall is all about. We never ever do anything of business together with them. And so it's for the Christian Democrats, especially for Merz, who personally stands for this kind of firewall, is just one element, maybe not in this decisive one, but one element why it is so difficult to do business with Orban. Having said all that, I would take a sober look and see, if you look at the reasons why the majority of the people in Hungary and in Germany want the government center right. Some important reasons for that are they prefer a so-called bürgerliche Politik. They prefer a politics that is basically playing to people who want to live an ordinary life, a normal life with a family, etc., pp, and so on. And this kind of outlook is also something that is fancied in Germany a lot. So I think there's basically actually a lot of common ground for the Christian Democrats and the Fidesz and Orban and the party leader to eventually come together. And now, with a view on the international situation, there are, I think, also a lot of incentives, even more coming from outside, why this would be a good idea. For instance, I think in my view that Hungary has always been a very reliable NATO ally. is also doing the right things for their own security policy, contributing to the security in Europe, which is something that is of much importance right now. And I think there is in this respect, when it comes to defense, military, geopolitics, European security, etc., pp. I think that the understanding of Germany and Hungary should be a stable and reliable one. Yeah, and I could go one step further. Both have huge interest in China as a market. That's something that Hungary is very open about it. And maybe I could say Germany is really desperate about it right now, but they have common interests when it comes to China. And they have different views when it comes to the Trump administration. But I mean, Trump is there for 4 years. Maybe J.D. Vance is the successor. So that would make it 8 or even 12 years. You got to live with these new American administration, and Germany could also learn something from adjust to realities when it comes to the United States and their long-standing issue of burden burden sharing, which has been neglected by many European countries, including Germany, and they have adapted now very fast to the new realities that Trump means business when it comes to burden sharing.
I could listen to you for hours, but unfortunately, our time's up. So thank you very much, Professor, for being with us today. I'm sure we heard an excellent analysis of the German election, snap election, and the current domestic political situation. So thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure, and thanks for inviting me.
And thank you for following, dear listeners, our discussion on the German snap federal election. If you like this interview, please subscribe and follow our channel for more content, and keep tuned for the upcoming episodes. Goodbye, everyone.